Well, if you can hear me, can you hear me? I can't hear me, so that's what I have. My name is Mark Sorensen. I'd like to welcome you here to this. I am really pleased to see all the people who came out because I expected about 6. They deserve more than that. They're getting it, so that's great. So I won't try and talk too long. I was asked to MC this group because I'm old. And I have a lack of hearing, so you may have to repeat some things here. If they talk too long, I've got the hook. And so here we go. I will introduce the people in a minute. Well, I'll introduce them right now and see if I can match up the people with the people on the sheet here. All to my left, first person is Shirley Moore, and then we have Katie Gross. Oh, they put them in order, thanks. Bev Hackney, Alissa Henkel, but they switched. There's Ty, Pemberton, and then Taneisha, Cunningham.
I didn't realize we accidentally already had that.
Well, at least that's what I think. Who's who? Okay, I will go ahead and take the prerogative to start. Then Becky Damps gave us a list of 8 questions. I don't see how we can possibly get through these by midnight. I'm going to ask the people to actually, I'm going to give them some hints, and then I'm going to ask them to talk about maybe the one they want to do first, instead of in order or some sort of thing like that. But that'd be up to them, because after a couple of minutes, I get the hook. All right. In 1969, I came to Decatur with my wife for me to teach school. And when I had graduated from college. And I decided to enroll in a grad course right away. So my first connection to the Decatur Public Library, while I was living downtown, I could walk over to the Carnegie Library from our subsidized housing and go to the Carnegie Library, up the steps that were all worn out, into the other steps that were all worn out, and into the floors that were all worn out, with some of the rooms closed as hazards. And Ms. Damps runs the local history room and archives now, and if you do some digging on the website, you can find that a nice lady did oral history a number of years ago. And the librarian at that time, Mr. Dumas, has done an oral history. So if you read the Decatur Tribune and all the lamentations about the getting rid of the Carnegie Library, and compare that with Mr. Dumas' oral history, which basically says it was a rat's nest towards the end, you can decide whether or not the people of Decatur in 1969 and 1968 would have been really willing to put out several $1 million to try and totally rehab and redo all the floors in that building, as opposed to what they did. So in '69, I was taking graduate classes, and I would use the materials in that Carnegie Library because they had the original books from the 1890s and the original periodicals still in print. And that was helpful instead of having to go up and stay in the library someplace else. Then they moved into the old Sears building by 1971, as you know. And a couple of years later, we had children. And so we started using that little tiny kids' room they had there from the 1975 on through the early 80s. And before some of these people came and worked there. Then Norman Stewart was on the library board, and I worked with him at MacArthur, and he maybe suggested that I could be on, I thought, being on a library board, that sounds pretty cool. So as I got a job working for the state of Illinois, Secretary of State's office, I got appointed to the library board, and over the course of time, have been appointed by, I think, 5 different mayors in history. So I was on the library board for 2 terms, which is 6 years. And during that time, I realized now that in the archives that we created the foundation for the library. It wasn't there before. We had to decide whether or not the library was going to get and pay for Beta or VHS. We had to decide that we were going to finally get a security system so you couldn't run out with all your stuff. And that had lots of issues. And this was the same time I was borrowing sculptures and paintings from the wall and the racks back then in the library and taking them home to our house. During that time also, Mr. Dumont retired, and I was as a board, had to hire my first librarian. And we ended up doing the Decatur Fine Arts Film Series 5 years in the library upstairs. So those of you who remember the old Sears building had an upstairs auditorium with posts down the middle of it, so it's kind of hard to see some of the things. Then this new building we'll talk about here in about 1999, when we moved into this building, I was on the Friends of the Library board. Then they hired me as an archival consultant to work on some projects here, and they paid me. Then they hired me as, one of my former interns hired me as a substitute library, reference librarian here. And just before I got a full-time job here, the library went broke. So it saved them from having me as an employee. I was on the board again 6 years and president 3 times at that time. And now I am retired and I am the president of the Library Foundation. And we're happy to be able to give, because of your help, $50,000 to the library this last year to help pay for some of this furniture. I have probably given at least 8 to 10 or more talks from this podium over the course of the last few years, and I appreciate the library letting me do that at various times. So now we're going to start with Shirley Moore. I told her we're going to start with her, because since we're in this building, and since Katie worked in this other Slurs building, and Bev did too, but most people are from here pretty much, most of the time. So Shirley was instrumental in getting this building as you see it now. She was on the library board and then on the city council, and in 1999, let me have Shirley tell you a few things before we go on to the next one.
Can you hear me?
No, you have to use the microphone real close.
Well, I was first, Mayor Hamilton called me one day and said, "Can you hear me?" Oh, Shirley. I'm coming.
Take it out of the phone, take it out of the thing, hold it right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Try that.
That's okay. Well, first of all, I've lived here all my life, and I used the Carnegie, as did our children, so I'm very familiar with libraries. But Mayor Elmer Walton called me in 1977 and said, "Would you be interested in being on the library board?" And I said, "Sure." So he appointed me. I feel 2 years somebody had left early, and then he told me I could have 2 terms now. So I ended up, I was 8 years on the library board, and then I went to the city council for 8 years. When I decided not to run again, the mayor asked me, "What do you want to do now?" I said, "I'd love to go back to the library board." So there was a spot, he appointed me again. When I came back to that board, they were very concerned about the size of the building that was the old Sears. They were talking about, we need to think about the future, and we need to do something about a bigger building. There just was no way to expand that building. Katie knows what the children's area there definitely was too small. So within that board, we began to work towards doing something bigger. And we made it known to the public that we were looking for something. We didn't know exactly what. But then Sears was in this building, and they were moving to the mall. So we were contacted then by the owners of this building called Decatur Foresight. And I think the interesting thing about that is that in order to keep Sears downtown, people in this community had given money, and I don't know that they ever got any interest on it at all, to build this building for Sears and keep them down here. Well, then at that point, when Sears said, "Okay, we're going," that's Decatur Foresight contacted us, and then Jack Stinkle, who was a retired CPA,
I'm so sorry, Shirley.
I'm not used to this.
I know. I'm sorry, great story.
Sorry. Well,
Thank you.
okay, so at that point, we knew what we had to raise in order to buy this building to make it into a library. And we started then, we had a fundraising, and we had a fundraising on the board. We actually had a phone in one night. We applied for a state grant. We had some money. We knew we could sell the other Sears building. And then this city, we asked, we're going to need a bond issue from them, and they agreed to do that. The Friends of the Library gave us $50,000. So we ended up, we raised the money, we were able to buy the building, and we had then the architect, and John Mormon was our librarian then, who had experience in buildings. And he turned out he was kind of the building supervisor. We did have an architect, but the supervisor on the job was Oscar Hadley, and he was a wonderful person to work with. And I was here a lot. And I remember the first day after we bought the building, and I walked in, and here was the escalator, and I thought, we're going to make this into a library. But we did. So that's kind of the story of where we all, who contributed. It took us, I think, just about 2 years, but on September 7th, 1999, we opened the library. And it was a great day, and people flooded in, and there were smiling faces. It was wonderful. We had done it.
Okay, thank you. And one of the big difficulties of the former Sorensen building was parking. Those of you who remember that, there was always a board issue. There was no place to park publicly, really. And the drive up then got clogged, and it was a big deal. So Katie Gross came in the 1980s when my kids weren't in lap seat anymore, and they were big enough to ask for help still. And she's going to tell us when she came to the old Sears building and what it was like in that gigantic kids' room, as opposed to when Shirley helped with this building and you were thinking, oh, I'm in ladies' lingerie, oh, that's the kids' chorale. And the archive is in the refrigerator washing machine. Okay, Katie, what do you have for us? And tell them who you are and what you did.
Katie Gross, and I was the children's librarian starting on June 24th, 1985, I believe. And Arthur later became the AD librarian and worked in the library too, my husband. But we had been living in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I was working, I loved the job there. I was working as a children's librarian and walking 8 blocks to work from our apartment past James Monroe's law office and Mary Washington, George's mother's home. And, it was a lovely place to live and great people at the library. But I was walking 8 blocks to work, and Arthur was commuting either to DC or Richmond, and he was gone 12 hours a day. And we had 2 little boys, and it just was not ideal. So I saw an ad in Library Journal, School Library Journal, for an opening in Champaign-Urbana. And he had been working like at the National Gallery of Art Library as a paraprofessional, but he wanted to go back to school and get his degree. So I saw this ad for this job in the Urbana Free Library, and there was another one for Decatur, Illinois. So I looked that up on a map, and it didn't look all that far from University of Illinois. So I got interviews at both places and ended up getting this job. And this was under Mr. DeMar, and he was a very old school librarian. He, I guess, was from Maine.
Yes,
right.
Yes, from Maine, the state of Maine.
Yes, I think he would tell kids, I heard that he would tell kids in the children's department, do you know what they call somebody from Maine? A maniac. But anyway, it was kind of an odd interview because and it should have raised my, weird, heebie-jeebie sense, but he never I don't remember getting a tour of the children's department. I met Becky Arnold for about 10 seconds. She was in the children's department. And I met Rita Birch, the staff artist, in the elevator. But I spent hours with him. And so finally I said, you know, I have to catch a plane back in Champaign to get home. So, you know, so I said, don't you want to ask me any more questions? He didn't. So anyway, but I got the job, and when I got here, fortunately, it turned out there were wonderful people in the children's department. Joyce was one of the ones who was there, and of course, Mary Lou Dwyer, who's passed away, but she, you know, was just a very dear friend, and Becky. And so it worked out. But there were some odd things about the library at that point. I mean, everybody was Mr. and Mrs. Because you were already here, right? Yeah. Oh! Nobody used their first names. It was like just really strange. And you had to work a full year before you got to take any of your accrued vacation. That was very difficult with 2 little boys. And it's still ongoing, right?
It's not anymore, but it was at least until 2015 or 2016 until we decided that was uncivilized.
That wasn't civilized, and it was not family friendly, thank you. And then you also had to take them in week-long increments, and you had to know in January what your plans were for the year. And you couldn't leave the building on your breaks, even to run to the bank or the post office. And it was just very old school. At night, and we worked 9, you know, we were open till 9. So at closing time, you were expected to have all the chairs pushed up to the table so their feet met. And all the shelves had to be straight. And, you know, it was often busy right till 9 o'clock. And if you were 15 minutes late getting out, you were walking over the parking garage in the dark, and it was kind of creepy. But anyway, it was kind of... Okay, so then there's the book selection stuff. The adult department had book selection meetings every week, and every book had to have 2 positive reviews to even be considered. You know, Library Journal or Book List or whatever. And you had to they wrote up their book cards or their order cards, and they had to cite the review source. And that was before anything was automated, so you had to, you know, write down the review you read in the Library Journal, and then find another, you know, then you would come across the same one in Book List, and so you would have to file these cards in between. I mean, it was just so cumbersome. And there were some rules. Arthur reminded me, or he told me, I wasn't at these meetings, because the children's library didn't have to do this, but 2 mysteries a month were added to the collection, because I don't think Mr. DeMond likes mysteries very much. And it was frowned upon to buy the first book by an author. You know, they had to establish a pattern of you know, being successful authors before you purchased the books. In my case, if you wanted a book that didn't have, you couldn't find a book review for, and this happened to me once. It was Margaret Weiss Brown's The Friendly book that was published back in the 50s. It was a great book for toddlers. I had to write a review and attach it to the order card, and then he had to approve that I would buy this book by Margaret Weiss Brown. So it was kind of a different era. The children's department did start to feel pretty small. There were no windows, except, well, when you went down the hall to the story room, there was a window at the end there, but not that you would be looking out, and the curtains were always closed. So, and anyway, it was kind of claustrophobic, and so I was very excited about this new building. And we would come over when it was still Sears, and we would, like, you know, look at the options and the plans, and the architects were great. They really included the staff on the discussions, and we gave a lot of input. I said, I don't think this escalator is a good idea. I do not want to spend the rest of my professional life telling children to stop running up the down escalator and vice versa. And they listened, and it was very expensive to add that staircase, but they did it. And I think it was right. I really think it was the right thing to do. They originally had the children's department in the other half of the upstairs, and Mary Lou and I went over there when the building was empty and realized that if you stood at either end of that space, you could like scream at the top of your lungs and probably your coworker wouldn't be able to hear you. It was enormous. So they changed the sides of the library, and we got the beautiful view of the transfer house and the children's department. So it was a very exciting thing to go through that, and it was probably 6 times bigger than the children's department had there. So anyway, that's my early story.
Beverly's got one there. You give her a round of applause. And you push one of my memory buttons with Mr. Dumas. Harold Robbins, we can't have any Harold Robbins books. He's the most popular guy in town. Writes trash. So I hear from my neighbor, Bev Hackney. She was locked in the basement at the old Sears building. She'll tell us how she came. And when you came down the stairs, sometimes you would see her. She made everybody check in with her to go there. And let me remind the audience, did we still have bathroom passes at that point?
We did.
Okay. All right, so go ahead, Beverly.
Yeah, Bev Hackney. I'm hearing so many things here that I haven't thought of in years. So I hope I can think of something new. Anyhow, I came in 1982 as a half-time library assistant, and we had come from Springfield, where I had been a page supervisor, and we moved here because my husband at the time had gotten a job here, and there just happened to be an opening here for that half-time reference job, so I was lucky enough to get that. And after a few years, my husband's job went away. Actually, he went away, and I stayed. And I was here for 37 years before I retired in 2019. And yeah, I started out in the old library in the basement. Again, no windows. We didn't have library security at that time. At a later date we did in this building. But it could get a little scary down there when you would have some groups of unruly teenagers come by after school, and they had their natural boisterousness coming out. But it was a little scary sometimes, but I learned so much from the two that I worked with, Phyllis Johnson and Mary Harper. Taught me everything I knew about being a librarian, and their standards were very high, and I owe them a lot. And then later on, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship from the Illinois State Library to go back to school, get my degree, and be promoted to an actual professional librarian position. But I still say Phyllis and Mary taught me everything I know about being a real librarian. Let's see, what else can I think? I remember getting our first computers, because when I first started, there were no computers in this building. The first computers we used were, I think, something called InfoTrack, which was an indexing service for magazines. I should just type in something and find a magazine article on that. It was really helpful back when students were still coming in and actually doing research papers. I'm not sure that happens anymore. But I remember being the one in charge. I mean, I had no technical background or experience, but apparently I was the best we had at the time because I was in charge of getting the CDs and putting them in the computer and updating everything. And that's what I did. And then I remember getting computers, and I remember sitting in one of the offices with Arthur at one time when we first got a look at the internet, and we were looking at each other and thinking, wow, this could be a game changer. Yeah, those are the things that have stood out to me, mostly the changes that I've seen.
This is kind of interesting. When I got here in '85, there was an automated circulation system. And I think it was one of the first public libraries in the country to get one, because apparently it was, in the World Book Encyclopedia, in the article on public libraries, Decatur Public Library was mentioned because of this automated, you know, it was not that, it was just that you could access, and the books were barcoded, I guess, by then. So it was an early use of.
Is that Fred?
Cunningham?
Friendly
Right.
resources, easily demonstrated.
It was before that. That was the
before
catalog. That was the first catalog.
Okay.
Right, but this was even before that. Yeah, just for circulation.
I think the cutting edge was due to the great library board they had at that time. In 1980. I want to comment that Bev and I have had a long history in various ways. And
Watch it.
And I do remember having to go up to Bev, this young girl, and say, I gotta go potty. Here's my wallet. Okay? And I'll be right back. And then she gave me the key to the bathroom. And this went on not only in this library, but lots of other libraries in the country. But that's one of my fond memories of Bev.
How many times do I have to come check on you?
And she was in charge of this is other duties as assigned, and she was in charge of lots of different things. And one was the early archives, I remember. And one of the films we showed in the Fine Arts Film Series was Cinema Paradiso. And in that movie, the Italian the film booth burns up because of the film. And I said, oh, Bev, do we have some of that film in your archives here? So we went out of the back loading dock, and I lit the film, and it blew up. So we decided we needed to get rid of some of that film stock. All right, we have Alissa Henkel. You're going to tell them when you came here. I'm not sure about why. And then what you like to talk about.
Well, I think it's very important to state that I was born and raised in Decatur, Illinois. And although I'm not old enough to have been to the old Carnegie Library, I was in the old Sears Library several times. I confess it scared me. It always seemed very dark. I didn't like it. I was scared of the children's area. It seemed enormous to me. And it didn't help that my mom dropped me off at the door because there was no parking. So another thing that's important is when I was 5 years old, I have a photo album that I still have where I wrote that I wanted to be a librarian when I grew up. And although I changed my mind multiple times, this is where I settled. I even got my master's degree in library science long before I had a real library job. I worked at the U of I in libraries, but I wasn't a librarian at the time. I applied to Decatur Public Library a lot. I think I got one interview before I was hired and one interview once I was hired. The first job I had, I was an academic librarian. All I wanted to be was public, but I was academic. And I also spent a good deal of time in the medical library. Then that was in Danville, Illinois, not Decatur. And I wanted to be in Decatur, and eventually Archer Daniels Midland Company paid for my family to move to Decatur to be a corporate librarian. And so I was there for a while, still not public. The only book I got to read that was remotely fictional was The Informant. And one of my jobs was to buy them all out so nobody could get them. I worked on the 6th floor with the Andreases. It was fascinating. Then they got rid of both of their corporate and their research library, and I was without a job for a while. And I've been working full-time in libraries for over 8 years, and I'd also been the breadwinner for a while. So I continued to look for a job that's going to support my family, and I wasn't getting it. And I still remember the day a friend of mine called me and said, there's an opening for a part-time library assistant in the children's department at Decatur Public Library. And I'm like, no. But I wasn't getting anything else, and so I agreed, and I remember coming to, I think it was at the Civic Center, yeah, and there was a whole panel of people, I mean like 6 people, because you were there, and
People from adult services, because you could have not gotten that job and been on the list for a later job in adult services.
bingo. So there were lots of people, very. I'm an introvert, I'm not a people person, you may not believe me, but it's true. And I was scared. I think now I can look back and say I was scared of libraries and librarians because they had lots of control. And I think that's part of the reason I decided to become a librarian, because I wanted to buck the stereotype. I wanted to be welcoming and friendly, and I didn't want people to be scared of me. I wanted people to come. But what was important about that interview was Katie and I hit it off, because I had written a research article on Nesbitt, and exactly. And you and I were like right there, and like, oh, I can do this, and you offered me the job. Something unusual, the director at the time called me and told me not to take it. We've talked about this, Leanne. Yeah. So she told me that I could wait, that I could work at Kohl's, and the right job would come along eventually. I couldn't wait any longer. Yes, you knew that. It's been a while. I've been here for 22 years.
Well, how did that one out?
I tried. So anyway, I took the job, and gosh, I worked in that position for 10.5 years under Katie. And as Bev had said, I learned everything I needed to know about libraries from Katie. Everything I learned in library school, toss that out the window. This is much more fun. And for me, it was the most magical time. I considered myself retired, working part-time, raising 2 girls. That's when I was designing displays and story time. Oh gosh, I got to do all the preschool story times one year. And it was just so much fun. So this place, prior to it becoming a library, I spent more time in Sears than I did at the old library, because I was scared of the library. In Sears, you had to come, because that's where they had Cabbage Patch Kids and underwear. And I bought my very first sofa.
And escalators.
Oh, I was scared of escalators. Oh, but they had penny candies in the outer walls, and I always got 25 cents of non-perils. That was my favorite. And the dolphins out front that the library doesn't have. We should get those back. Anyway, now that I was working here, I was living my life here and started bringing my children here, and just, wow, I grew up. And then after 10.5 years, they let me grow up, and that's when I became head of the adult department. A lot of people jumped ship and they needed somebody to take it over, and I was willing to do it for the price that was handed me. And I stuck to it, even though, I mean, the adult department, before that time, there were like 13, 14 staff before all the slashes and the cutbacks. And when I moved downstairs, there were 6 of us. And there were, 37 hours on the desk just to make it happen. It was rough. And we're so lucky that Director Meyer came shortly after that, because I think you were hired April 2014, after I moved downstairs in November of 2013. And it took a while, but since he came back, he's restored staff. So in the last 5 years, we've combined the adults and the children's department to what's called Programs, Resources, and Services. And that entire department has about 13 people in it, including a part-time social worker who's contracted. And we're finally at a place where we can be pretty comfortable, even when somebody goes on vacation. So there's been a lot of change and a lot of scarcity, but right now it just feels like the sunshine's coming in, and all the colors and all the great people that have joined us in the last few years. It's just been really remarkable. So I'm glad that I've stayed as long as I have. All I ever wanted was a job that I could stay in.
We'll talk about ridiculous at some point later on, because my grandchildren have partaken in some of that stuff, and that's great. And Alissa was my last boss for a few months here before I got fired. Technically. Now, Ty, Pemberton, is it true that you moved here from California because of the threat of wildfires?
Well, yes and no. So
Tell people
I've been here a long time. So way back in May of 2022, I headed out here to join the Decatur Public Library, but if we want to do the whole story, it rewinds a little bit until early January and December of the previous year. My lovely spouse, LJ, and I have always fantasized about moving to the Midwest. We've bounced around the country a lot during our lives. We hadn't really planned on it, and we started looking around the Decatur, Champaign, Springfield area, just for fun. And we started to see some really amazing places here in Decatur. We saw just a ton of house for not a lot of money. And we thought, oh, this will never work, but if we don't practice, we won't get good at it. So we put in for a mortgage on the house, and right at that moment, my position was opening up at the Decatur Public Library. I had been in digital librarianship for about 11 years at that point. I was, at that time, the digital imaging manager for the digital library at the University of Southern California. So I was very much behind the scenes. I spent most of my time working in, you talk about how dark the children's section was in the old library. My entire career was in windowless rooms with no HVAC. With no lights on, like absolutely dark. But I applied to this position, making the shift from an academic librarian to a public librarian, and I thought, they're never going to call me back. I'm 100 million miles away. My background is not in public librarianship, and I was astounded and very lucky to be contacted by Alissa and Rick, and then even luckier to have Alissa and Rick and the staff here on the hiring committee see something in me and bring me on. I am, at best, a tinkerer, but it's been useful. And that's the story of how I got here. There might be other stories later, but a lot of it has to get squished because I have less history to talk about.
Thank you. Ty's ability have brought in extra money into the library from people and donations because of the great work he's done in specialized things that you don't know about. That we can't talk about for this. Like me, Taneisha Cunningham is a former employee of the Decatur Public Library. And so, Taneisha, would you tell the
Sure can.
audience here when you started and what you did here before you left?
Hello everyone, I'm Taneisha. I started in 2013. I started in January in 2013. I was so excited to work at the library. I came from California as well, was not running from wildfires at that time, flooding mostly. I got married and I came here. When I came to Decatur, one of the first places I visited was the library, and the wonderful Katie Groves greeted me and my children, and I fell in love. That was what it was. I came here in 2009. I applied for a job in 2012 as a library page. I got the job in January of 2013. I met the wonderful Patty back there that's been here forever. She taught me everything I knew. She taught me how to straighten shelves. And she was very strict with it too, so. I was under Leanne and got laid off in October of 2013. But that's okay. I came back in 2016 and it was just it's a family atmosphere here. That's what it was, and it just made me stay. I came on as a library page again, and then I moved up to a clerk, and I fell in love with it. It's amazing here. It's amazing here. It's so family oriented, and it's very inclusive. So that's my skill.
In the 55 years I've been here, we've had, for the most part, 99% great library staff. And I won't name the other ones. But it's really very wonderful. And we have a couple of other questions here that Becky wrote. It was very nice of her to structure this, but I'm going to ask the audience first to see if they have some specific questions. Here are what other questions we can get to in a minute if we need to. What's your most memorable moment here at DPL? How would you say the library has impacted the community? What changes did you see in services? Don't need your wallet anymore. What do you see as the future of the library? So, but first, let's see. Is there anyone in the audience who has a specific question they'd like to have addressed before we go back to the panel? Well, okay, we're here.
I don't know if you remember, Mark, that you came in to having children sign up for the summer reading club.
Okay.
And they were too young. And you didn't accept that. You went home, made your own folder, and kept track. I was impressed.
I'm not sure if you heard that, but it was me being insubordinate. Again, that I brought my children in to sign up for this is my children now, who are now 49 and 50, to sign up for the kids' reading program. And I was refused because they were too young. But they're very precocious. They both have jobs. They all have master's degrees. So, all because of you guys. All right. Okay, we're going to have you take the microphone and put it right underneath your just like that.
I'm not used to this.
Yes.
I just want to say something about the board. You've heard all these wonderful things that go on in the library, but it took a board to make all the plans to get to this building. And the board worked really hard. And I remember Dick Lockbiller was our fundraiser locally. And I remember one day, I was here a lot, and I came to the office upstairs, and Dick was there, and he says, "Where have you been?" We had just gotten a $20,000 pledge. We had a fundraising night where we had phones and volunteers who came in and called people. So it took a lot of work. I would also say that I was in the committee that brought Rick here. So I think I'm saying something about that. But the board worked really hard in order to make this work. We had to convince the city to issue a bond issue. But it was a great board. And then when we opened this building, and it took, I think, 3 weeks, the staff worked really hard, and some of the board members came down here and helped work too. We had a board member who brought goodies to keep us going. So anyway, it was a great experience. I think your board members said that. They enjoy being on the board. It is a wonderful experience. I'm grateful I had it, and I'm grateful for this building.
And I will say that I never came up those stairs a single day where I didn't just appreciate being in that space. So I did not take it for granted every day.
Rick, do you have a full board right now?
We do.
Yes, you do.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I just let the public know here, if you ever want to serve on the board, you need to talk to Rick, but you can contact the mayor. The mayor appoints these positions. So Rick's going to say something.
But Shirley makes a great point. A great library requires a great board.
And we've been very, very fortunate. In the 11 years I've been here, we've always had a great board. We've sometimes had a small board, but you know, I talk to colleagues all around the state, and they consistently, it's board horror stories, and I just go, oh, we don't have that problem. We've got, I'm happy with my board. So we're very, very fortunate. We've had, and I was told when I got here, I was told the day I interviewed in this room by the community, I was told, fantastic volunteers in Decatur. You're gonna have people step up, and that's been true, because it's not just the board of trustees, it's the Friends Board and the Foundation Board too. So that's a very good point, Shirley.
All right, is there another question before I, okay, go ahead. Question?
Hold on.
I turned it off too.
I got it.
What is the most memorable interaction you have had with the public? Good, bad, or not? Good, bad, or
This is Law and Order. Police stories.
I'll get it started. This is memorable when you have a very small child with a very snotty nose who's been coughing and hacking the whole time they're here, and they see you and they love you because they know you, and they come running, and because we are who we are, we get down on our knees and take them in and love them, and then afterwards we're like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? That's not one time. That's just, anybody who's worked in the children's section knows exactly what I mean, because they love on us, but it's like, wow, what we will do.
I guess I can say that what I miss the most being at the library are holidays around here. Halloween, everybody's dressing up. Christmas, everybody, you know, have the reds and the greens on. I mean, the holidays were so magical. And then the children coming in with their smiles on their faces when they see everybody else, John like in his dinosaur costume, and you know, everybody else. It was just magical here. The holidays, that's what I miss, you know, and that's memorable to me. So, you know, that's.
I think this is kind of important to say. The number of times that librarians put on programs, and we get at the front and we wait and we hope that somebody will come. That we asked for maintenance to put up 100 chairs, and we're just, please, please, people come. So being a part of Ridiculous, I remember the first time we asked people to come and we saw a few, and we're like, oh my gosh, 3 people came. 10 more, oh there's 20. We had 100 people at our first show. Now we've had over 300. Those are just, they melt your heart. But the fact that all of you guys came or stayed or are taking a break just to come to this program, I cannot tell you how much that means to us that you guys care about this library and what we've done for the past 150 years and what we're planning for the future. So clap for the audience. We're just so happy to have you all here today. And this means a lot to all of us, including the planners.
Taneisha, do you have more?
No, I'm giving it to Ty.
Ty is?
So much like everybody else, this is not one individual interaction, but there are a handful of interactions that happen regularly at this library that are really, really, really rewarding for me. Rick wasn't wrong when he said that when he was brought on, the board told him that he was going to get just a glut of really, really incredible volunteers, and I think that speaks a lot to just the character of Decatur in and of itself. I think communities generally are measured by how well they take care of each other and everyone in their community. I don't know if you all know, but we have a community resources coordinator here at Decatur Public Library, and 3 things that I see regularly as the public services librarian are people who come and we give them as much help as we can, getting them on the computer, getting them started on job applications, and a lot of times they are absolutely intimidated, they're frightened, they're anxious, and then a couple of weeks later they'll come in and they'll tell us that they got the job. That is an incredible feeling to watch happen over and over and over again. With regards to community resources coordination, one of the things that our community resources coordinator just does is she will put people in touch with organizations that will help them find housing if they're housing insecure or without housing. And another really exciting thing to do is to have people who come in every day to feel like this is a safe, comfortable place, who may be housing insecure, and then a month rolls by, another month rolls by, they say, hey, the application is moving forward, and then a little while later, I'm in housing, and everything just starts to go up, 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 up for them after that. That is incredibly rewarding. And then, you know, the last thing, which is the story that you kind of expect to hear in librarianship, is people who come in, maybe it's their first time at the library, maybe it is their first time at the Decatur Library, or maybe it's their first time in the library in decades. And they say, I was really just trying to get into like reading or watching things again, and they don't know where to start. And to talk to them and find out what excites them, and to try to put them in the direction of something that just lights their imagination and gets them excited again, and to watch them leave so excited with the things that we offer and be ready to come back is also extremely, extremely rewarding. And Alissa and I both came from academic librarianship, and that has its rewards. But one of the things that I always say to people who ask me, the question I get asked a lot is, oh, why did you come to Decatur? Why are you working at the Decatur Public Library? Every day I get to come in, I get to sit down, and I get to do a little good and get paid for it. And that is not something you can say about every job, so I'm very, very grateful to be working here with, honestly, I've seen a lot of libraries. I think it's one of the greatest public libraries that I've ever been to. So I'm very, very, very grateful.
Shirley, we're going to put that right up like a popsicle.
Can you hear me now?
So that I can hear you.
I want to talk about the Friends of the Library bookstore. I still volunteer with the Friends. What a group it is. I love it. I can't leave the library in a way. I've just been here so much. It's just a wonderful place. It really is. But the Friends of the Library bookstore, thanks to Rick, who found the space for that, and I work sales periodically, scan books, whatever they need to do. It's a great group, and people come in and they're so complimentary. And boy, I got to tell you, a friend gave me some things to bring in to sell for the Friends, and Tony wasn't sure they were going to sell because they were kind of unusual. They were English, singer, different. Today he came in and told me we sold them, and did sold very well. So now I can tell my friend they were sold and did something well for the Friends. But that's a great place to go, and some people have not been there, didn't know about it. So we need to spread the word. It's fun, and it's a fun group.
When you're a patron or on the board and you see something wrong, you'd like to have it fixed the next hour. It never works, but I'd like to say here tonight, we're doing things tonight that have not been done here in my memory. This room often had one microphone that never worked. 1, 2, 3.
We have 4 microphones.
4 microphones going on at the same time. There is no feedback. The sound is good. They are in comfortable chairs. They look really professional. And there are other things like that. When we were in the old Sears building, they built a new archives, and it was built around the elevator shaft, and it was as big as a small bathroom. We moved here and had a different thing, and Bev was assigned that for a little while, and then we got an archivist, and then the board, because of the old foundation before me, said, we raised this money, you're going to build the local history room. So we have one of the best local history room archives in the state. We have the biggest children's department in the world here. So, Rick, go ahead.
Mark, speaking of sound system, I want to announce that in the very near future, by the next couple months, thanks to the generosity of Susie Marshall, we will have a hearing aid loop installed in this room. Those of you who aren't familiar, what a hearing aid loop does is enhance, for those that are sitting inside the loop, and the loop will be installed all around in the ceiling tiles, anybody sitting inside the loop, it enhances the effectiveness.
It sends the signal to your hearing aid
Correct.
instead of over the sound system.
Yep. So that's a pretty exciting thing, and we thank Susie for her generosity for that.
All right. The audience has been behaved very well because they know they can get more food in a minute. So before we go ahead and stop, and I have learned it's better to stop while you're ahead. But we have 5 minutes if anybody would like to make a final statement or predict the future here. I'm saying beta is not going to work.
There's so many more lines of resolution, Mark.
And those gigantic gold film discs we bought in 1989 aren't working much as well. But there are some other things, and there are a lot of things about the library that I don't use that Samantha uses. Books somewhere in space, movies somewhere in space, and other things like that that are we have to offer. Any other comments before we break for more snacks? Taneisha?
I will say, hoopla is one of the best things ever. And we offer that here, and I use it every day. So that's audiobook in space. That's just the best thing ever. That's that's my thing. That's my closing.
Okay. Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. So we thank you very much for coming today. There are some more refreshments back there. Come and mingle with your favorite librarian.
Real quickly before you all head back there and eat the cheesecake. Please eat the cheesecake, by the way. It's very good. It comes from Sam's. There are a few flyers back on the table. One of them is the Our Story is Your Story flyer. If you don't mind, fill at the back of it. You can fill it out. Tell us a story about your experiences with the library. A couple sentences here and there, that'd be great. We're hoping in the future to put something together where we can showcase how our patrons and our staff and former board members experience the library and have a nice display upstairs. It would be great. So that's on the table. The other thing that's on the table is the Q1 events that are coming up. Oh, there you go. Sorry. I thought I had it close enough. Okay, do I have to repeat the other thing? All right. Please fill out the Our Story is Your Story thing. It is awesome, and we would like to know your stories for the library. Also, there's a sheet on the table that has the events that are coming up for the next, February and March. Please take that. It's trivia. Hungry Town is coming back, and Michael Threets will be here on the 22nd of March, and that is pretty awesome. If you're not familiar, he was big on TikTok. He was Library Joy during COVID, and librarians love him.
And he's the librarian in residence for
PBS. He is the librarian in residence for PBS right now. He might be the next LeVar Burton. We're not sure. So he will be here. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.